All right, looks like we are live. Let me know if you guys can hear everything okay. I'm going to check the settings real quickly on here. I think actually it's supposed to be this way. I have such a professional setup here. Literally have this. Oh. Hey, Jen. Grabbing one more book. There we go. If you could see my setup. My husband definitely has a more professional setup for his podcast. Hi, Ashley. Okay. There we go. All right. So let me just make sure. Yep, that looks good. Okay. All right. So let's get into, hey, Shara, let's get into the discussion today. And we are talking about building a home of peace, not of conflict. And obviously, in today's world that we live in, homes that are peaceful are becoming more and more rare. As Christians, we should want a home that's peaceful and not a war zone, especially as Christians. You know, that should just be a given. As we raise our children, we are modeling a life that we want them to have. If our home is a constant place of stress, fighting, and turmoil, our kids are not going to want to choose the life that we're living. There are some things in life that are super important to me when it comes to raising my kids. And it's super important that they follow me in this way of life. And it's just one of my goals as a mom to try to ensure that they do. Obviously, at the end of the day, they all have choices. They all have a will. They're not robots. They all have a will and they all have to make these choices. But kids are a reflection of their parents. And good traits that you try to instill in your kids are going to come out. Bad traits are going to come out. At the end of the day, they are a product of their upbringing. That's why even for those of us now, this is not me. I am a second generation Christian. My mom was saved when I was 1. So I was pretty much raised in a Baptist household, a saved Baptist household. That's what I was raised in. But for a lot of people that get saved later in life, they find that it's really hard to break those, not so much like curses, but traits. So that's why if you have an alcoholic father, you're going to be more prone to becoming alcoholic yourself. A lot of people disagree with this, but there are certain things that go on in the home. If you're raised in a home where there's just constant cursing and bad language and people are calling each other names, you're going to be more inclined to do that as well. If you're raised in a home where anger is the first answer to everything, flying off the handle, throwing things, screaming, you're going to be more inclined to do that yourself because you're growing up with this precedent being set in your home and you learn how to react towards things based off how your parents react towards things. And a lot of times when there's good traits, when you see your parents exhibit good traits, you learn from those and you're more prone to do those good things, whether that's being a giving person, being a kind person, being compassionate. It's just how life works. And anyone that wants to argue that is not aware of how life works in homes. So there are some things that are very important to me though, as a mom though. And then obviously number 1 is that all my kids get saved. Now with my kids being in this church and being around soul learning a lot, hearing the gospel on repeat, I have found that they do get saved very young. 4, 5, 6, all of my kids up to Kelly. Hannah's the only one who has not. She's only 3. They've all, realized that they were a sinner, realized that they needed the Lord, and put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. And Kelly just got baptized about a month ago. So we were excited that she decided to follow the Lord in baptism just to show everyone that she had, called on him for salvation. So being that they're around, they're with us when we knock on doors. They're with us when they hear us give the gospel presentation to other people. It gets in their mind and heart very young. So Um, I have found that oftentimes, you know, kids kids do what they're exposed to, right? So when it comes to the area of salvation, if you're in a Baptist church and you're constantly going soul winning, your kids are hearing the gospel, even maybe at church, there's going to be a bigger chance that they will call upon the Lord early for salvation. So obviously, having them saved is my number one goal. Number two, I would say for my kids growing up in my home, keeping themselves pure until marriage is a big one for me. Now, this was big, big, big for my husband and I it's almost like there's this even among like doctors and the world. Take for instance, I just had a checkup. I had not been back to my midwife since Hannah was born, and she's almost 4. So it's been almost 4 years since I've been to the doctor for anything. So I just scheduled a routine checkup, and they asked me if I wanted to be tested for STDs. And I was like, no. I said, I've only ever been with my husband. He's only ever been with me. And my midwife looked at me like, well, and I said, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking all men lie, right? And she's like, well, they do. And there's been many wives that have been shocked to find out because their husband was cheating on them, that they have an STD. And I'm like, no, I said, I'm not, no. And it's pretty funny though, because even when I had my babies here in Illinois, it's the baby has to have like a blood prick test to see if they have AIDS. And I've always been like, there's no way my baby is going to have AIDS. Like, there's no way. That's just not possible. And they're like, nope, it's the law. If I can't remember, or no, it's if I, that's what it is. It's I have to get tested for AIDS. And they said, if I refuse, they will do a blood prick on the baby. And I'm always like, no, you're not doing a blood prick on my baby. Just test me, even though it's not even possible that I would have it because I haven't come in contact with blood from anyone that has. My husband and I have only ever been with each other. And so even the world is skeptical, but I'm finding more and more Christians are skeptical about this. Like they act like you live in this fantasy world if you think that your kids are going to marry pure, or if you say that their first kiss was at the altar, which Tommy and Jenna's was, my husband and I were, and Jason and Liz, that's the goal for them too. So not only do they act like you live in a fantasy world when it comes to purity, but they act like you live in a fantasy world. No one does this like this so over the top, right? It's so over the top and you didn't even do it. So why are you expecting your children to do it? Well, we did do it. And yes, we're expecting our children to do it as well. It is possible to have self-control in the world that we live in. It is possible to keep your body in subjection and not give in to your carnal desires. And it is possible to do that, guys. So that's really important for us. Them being pure until marriage. Also abstaining from alcohol and drugs. This is a big one for us and our kids. We really want to get that into their hearts young. Like this stuff is nasty. This stuff will alter the way you think. When it comes to my boys and even girls nowadays, pornography, we don't want them to be looking at any of that because we've seen just through being in the ministry for so long, so many people struggle with this. And my husband has had men reach out to him that are dealing with this. And it's a very common problem. Let's just put it that way. It's very, very common. And now it's even getting to the point where it's common that pastors are struggling with this as well. No man or no woman is above struggling with the sin of pornography. So we try from a very young age to instill it in their hearts that this will warp your mind. This will mess with your future relationship with your wife or your husband. You don't ever want to get involved in this. And then continuing to serve after they get married in their local Baptist church. That's really, really important for us. And then raising their kids to know Jesus. That's also very, very important for us because those are our grandkids. So I want my future grandkids to be in church their whole lives. And I want them to see that this is the best life possible. So those are all very, very important to us. Obviously, there's other things such as making sure they're educated, that they're competent enough to get a job in the real world. And so far, that has not been an issue. My son, Tommy, just passed his welding classes at Caterpillar. So he's now welding for Caterpillar. He's being very successful in his job. Jason is on his way to becoming an electrician. Abigail's working at the daycare, and I know they do a lot of courses for that. And none of my kids have ever struggled when it comes to good reading comprehension, knowing how to take tests, knowing how to succeed in the secular world. So obviously that is important too. But those things that I listed, the salvation, being raising their kids in church, them being involved in church still afterwards, being a soul winner, a faithful member of the church, those are more important to us than anything. So because of these things, because of these goals that I have for my kids, I have to provide a stable environment for them to grow up in. So how can we as mamas create a peaceful home for our kids? Well, number one, I think more than anything, when it comes to raising good kids is you have to have a good marriage. And you can't even have a good marriage. You have to have a great marriage. You have to have a marriage that is exemplary. You have to have a marriage that is strong and a marriage that is priority in your life. You have to have a good marriage. So what is our part in marriage? And contrary to popular opinion, I am not a feminist because I don't believe in husbands hitting their wives. I actually believe in the biblical roles in marriage, and it's very apparent what that is if you look it up. In fact, let me look up the verses. Some of the best verses about marriage are talking about women in reverence to their own husbands. Let me look that up real quick because it's such a great passage. It kind of has everything there in Ephesians. Ephesians 5:22 through 33. Wives, submit yourself unto your, and I want to put emphasis on this word. Wives, submit yourself unto your own. Own. Are we King James people here or are we not? Let me say that again. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. There goes my microphone. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify it and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth it and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. Not every man in the entire world, not someone else's husband, but her own husband. And I want to specify here that it's quite ridiculous that we have the King James Bible and we believe in it. And yet there are men going around thinking that they can tell women to shut up and go make their husbands a sandwich. And they have no jurisdiction over her at all. So there's men preaching against women having blogs and podcasts when it's not their jurisdiction at all. It's not their wife and it's not their problem. So our part, I agree with absolutely everything I just read in Ephesians. I believe that breakdown in Ephesians is one of the best breakdowns for biblical roles within marriage. I do believe that the husband is the head of the home. He is the one that bears the responsibility of leading the home, guiding the home. So in that sense, patriarchy, yes, I fully support it. Like I've said, though, patriarchy can attract a lot of men who are all into beating their chest and saying, I'm the head of the home, but they completely neglected the second part of that chapter in Ephesians, where it talks about loving their wife. As the patriarch of the family, there's a lot more responsibility on you, and you are going to bear the responsibility and the consequences of consequences of whatever choice that you make as the head of the home. Because of this, it's a lot more than beating your chest and just yelling that you're the boss. It is also doing your part of loving your wife as the Bible says to love it, as the Bible says to love your wife. So, yep, I agree wholeheartedly with that. I am all for biblical roles in marriage. And our husbands are our only authority, not other men, unless it comes, of course, like the other day, I was just pulled over for speeding. It was a male cop, and he was my authority in that situation. I was speeding. It looked like it would be 55. It was not. It was a 45. I was going like 13 over. And I was respectful and I was kind. He was like, "Do you know why you're being pulled over?" And I was like, "No." I said no, because I remembered my husband had told me a long time ago, like, never like say you know why they're pulling you over. Like, always ask, "Why are you pulling me over?" Or just, so I was like, no, because I had forgotten it was like a 45 because it's in the country, but there was some businesses, so they had lowered the speed limit to 45, and I forgot about it. And he was like, I told him, I said, "I have never been pulled over." And he's like, "Well, now you can't say that." But thankfully he just gave me a warning. But if I would have been like, "You're not my husband, you're not my boss," obviously there are times where we have to submit to the law of the land, and that would include the speed zone or whatever. So, the speed limit. So, obviously, there are times when I'm talking about when it comes to familial matters and matters of the home and matters of how you raise your family and how you conduct yourself, your husband is your only head. And if your husband has different advice than my husband, or has not even different advice, but he has a way that he wants you to run your home, different than what my husband, then you listen to your husband. I'm not here trying to get you all to rebel against your husbands. I'm just giving you tips and tricks for what has worked for us and what's worked in our family. I have women asking all the time, "What do I do in this situation? What do I do in that situation?" I'm like, "This is what's worked for us." And so far, so good. So I'm going to keep giving the advice as long as it is helping. So, what do you do if your husband is a jerk? And I've gotten this question a lot. It's really tough because I don't believe in divorce. I do believe that once you say I do, you work your way through any issues. Hopefully, you marry a good, godly man who wants to love you like Christ loved the church. Sometimes, though, you don't really know a man until you get married. I thank God every day. We were very young when we got married. We were 20. And I just thank God that he's a good man. I consider myself very, very blessed that I got him and that he loves me in the way he does love me, because there's a lot of bad men out there. There's a lot of bad women out there. So, you are kind of taking a chance when you enter into marriage. That's why I would suggest for you younger ladies out there, be very, very careful, because it is till death do you part. Now, it's better to pray about a situation than nag your husband to death. And that would come with being a jerk. Don't exchange tit for tat. Don't, if he, a soft answer turns away wrath, and that works in any situation. So definitely, you're probably going to need to be the better person when it comes to marrying someone that's just a total jerk. And you're going to have to exchange gentleness with fire a lot of times. And then just pray that you'll get into a good church where maybe there's accountability for him and he'll be under good, godly men that will encourage him to do better and encourage him to step up his game and to love you the way that Christ loves the church. So, but yeah, if you married a jerk, it's going to be a lot harder for you if you're just exchanging fire for fire all the time and just constantly fighting. So I would say just try to be the peaceful, sanctuary that he needs when he's coming home. Pray for him, um, love him, soft answer turns away wrath, different things like that. So some advice for young wives. Yes. And Maria, I've always stood firm on, if there is physical abuse, you need to get help. You don't need to stay in that situation where you're being hit. And especially if there's children involved, because there have been tragic outcomes from very abusive men who have, okay, let's just put it this way. Anytime that a wife ends up murdered or her kids, the guy is always the first suspect. And why is that? Because this happens a lot. A lot of times when there's a lot of domestic things, the husband will hurt the children to get at the mom. Oftentimes, if he's going down and he just can't face the fact of his wife leaving him because he has been physically abusive, he will turn on the kids, turn on her, and then turn on himself. So that oftentimes happens in horrible situations like that. I watch a lot of true crime, and it's a legitimate concern. If your husband is physically abusive to you, definitely reach out to the authorities, reach out to the pastor of your local church if he's a good guy, if he's not someone who covers for abusers. I want to put that out there. Because any good Baptist pastor worth his salt is not going to tell you to just stay with a man and take it if he's beating you up, if he's physically harming you in any way. So he's going to suggest that the man gets help, that the authorities are called, and as pastors too, and anytime there's a situation involving children, you are a mandated reporter. So if the husband has been physical towards the children at all, if there's any type of physical abuse going on, you are a mandated reporter at that point, and you can get in trouble for harboring someone or covering for someone that is being abusive. So I want to throw that out there too. But yeah, advice for young wives: pray over nagging. Prayer works a lot better than nagging. Make your husband a priority. He is number one in your life. He's the number one relationship in your life over anyone, even the kids. Don't tell your family about fights, disagreements, etc. Be available for him intimately. Get the kids on a schedule so you can spend time together. I knew from the time that we got married, like, he is my one and only. He is my most important relationship out of anyone on this earth. And so even though we started having kids really quickly, and like every year, the first 4 years we had 3 kids, I was like, I'm getting them on a schedule so that we can have time together in the evenings. He had to be in bed he wanted to be asleep most nights by 9 because he was getting up at like 3 in the morning. So I made it a priority to make sure the kids were in bed and asleep by 7. And then we had a couple hours to spend with each other. And that really sustained us during those early years when it was really hairy with all those little kids. That was the only thing that probably like kept our relationship in good shape, was doing that, because I made him a priority. Don't be easily offendable. This is something all of us women can work on. Take correction. Just don't get defensive. Don't be upset at him. There's going to be times when he needs to tell you, knock it off. Don't do this. Don't do that. Just take correction. We all mess up sometimes. We all do things we shouldn't. I think there is a time and a place where you can lovingly approach him if there's some sin in his life. And if he's a good guy, he'll listen to you, even though you're not the boss of him. If he's a good guy, then he's going to know that he has faults as well in his own life. So be careful with your words. This kind of links to the next one: figure out problems in the morning. There's a lot of people that promote this: don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. Well, I found in marriage, speaking as someone who has almost 24 years of marriage, problems get escalated at night. If you're up at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, duking it out, problems are going to be bigger. Emotions are going to be higher. You're going to be tired. And your husband's thinking, I got to get up at 4 a.m. This is stupid. He's not going to want to listen to you. And you both have the tendency to get really mean. And then once you say those mean words, you can't take them back. And words do have power, and words do have meaning. And I don't care what anyone says, words are powerful. So be careful about staying up till 1, 12 in the morning. Figure your problems out in the morning. You're you're stuck with each other till death do you part, right? So you have time to figure this out. So just figure it out in the morning. Back him up publicly. Don't ever put him down in front of other people. Don't make snide comments. Don't mock him. Okay, so in your marriage, definitely take time to do things together. Make it a priority. Remember that you two are the most important relationship on earth. Don't belittle him in front of your kids. Don't, say nasty things about him. I only ever build up my husband to my kids. You have such a great dad. You have such a great role model. He's such a great preacher, different things like that. And they'll agree with me. They totally agree with me. If you both fulfill your biblical roles, you will have a great marriage. And I know this. I know this because I'm in one. So yeah, and I agree. J. Lane Hardy said, my mom gave me advice when I got married. She told me to never withhold sex and use it to my advantage. And there are biblical, that's another biblical principle, is that when we get married, we both mutually belong to each other, basically. Like his body belongs to you, your body belongs to him. So this is not saying that a man can just force you if you don't feel like it, okay? A loving husband is not going to do that. Is it his right to have that? Most likely, because you agreed to it when you got married, but is he going to be a jerk and force that right on you? Most husbands will understand if you've been up half the night with the newborn, or half the night with the 1-year-old or the 2-year-old or whatever. Husbands are going to be, if they're loving you the way that Christ loved the church, they're not going to force anything on you. But as a wife, if you are loving your husband and realizing that you are the only source that he can find satisfaction through when it comes to physical things, you're going to recognize that it's a big responsibility for you as the wife, and you're going to take that seriously. And you're not going to defraud him or withhold yourself from him. I mean, there's going to be obvious, legitimate things, sicknesses, just having a baby, postpartum, you're advanced in pregnancy. There's going to be times where he just needs to show self-control and realize this is just a season. But if you are a wife who you're mad at your husband, so you withhold it. He did something you didn't like, so you withhold it. That's a really bad rut to get into. And you should be willing to be there when he wants it, when he needs it, And if you do that, you're going to have a really good marriage. So all of these things are just intended. I'm saying these things intended to give you a good marriage. You're going to have a really good marriage if you do all these things. Okay, so how can we also have a peaceful home? By living what you preach. So basically, be the same wherever you are. Be the same at church, be the same at home, be the same whatever you're doing on vacation. If you have standards, live your standards and teach them. Remember that your home is your home. You don't follow others. You do what you do because of conviction. So, like one of these things is television. Do you have TV or not have TV, right? Well, just remember that you can be all, we've never had TV. Like us personally, we've never paid for cable. We don't have cable. But guys, this is 2024. We have smart TVs now, okay? And the smart TVs have YouTube and Amazon and Netflix or Disney or whatever you get, all these apps that they have. There's a lot of people like saying, oh, I don't have TV and beating their chest. And then they get home from church and they go on this thing right here and they watch their phone, which is exactly the same thing as watching the TV. So I think rather than just pounding your chest and saying, we don't have TV, why don't you just teach your kids what you should watch and what you shouldn't watch, what you should put in front of your eyes and what you shouldn't, So for our home, we just have a basic standard. Yeah, we've never paid for cable. We don't have cable, but we've got YouTube, And so for us, we have some set rules in our home that we follow as guidelines. So basically, no nudity. I don't want anything playing with nudity in it. I don't like foul language in my home. So nothing with where they're dropping the F-bomb every other. That's not necessary in a Christian home. We don't talk that way. So I'm not going to bring that into my home where they're talking that way. We don't do rated R movies. There's a lot of standards that we have in our home, and I don't think it's anymore I don't think now in 2024 it's the question of do we have a TV or we don't have a TV, because if you have a smartphone, which I know some people that don't have smartphones because that's their conviction, and that's fine. At least they're being consistent across the board. But you could not have a TV hanging up in the corner and you have this, which is exactly the same thing, because you're watching exactly the same thing on here that I'm watching on my TV. So it's not a matter of having a TV or not having a TV. It's a matter of figuring out, getting instilled into your kids' hearts early. Like, we are Christians, so we're not going to watch this. We're Christians, so we're not going to allow this in our home. We're Christians, so we're not going to be listening to this filthy language, all day long or whatever it is. So, so there will always be temptation, and you have to teach character to not watch certain things, because there's always going to be temptation when it comes to certain things. So it's instilling the character in their hearts where they turn it off. Even for my little girls, sometimes they watch these, my husband calls them stupidity. And we have to be careful because we'll find out. And we've trained the little girls to tell us if there's ever a boy trying to dress like a girl, a boy trying to put on makeup. Those are some things in our house. Sorry, we're for traditional things, and we don't want our girls getting acclimated, the babies getting acclimated to the thought that a boy can put on a dress or a boy can put on makeup. And that might even eliminate like some of the old movies, like black and white movies where they used to do that. So that's a big deal in our home. And there's been a couple times where Hannah will be like, Mom, that boy is putting on high heels. And it's just like some little kid show with a boy dressing up at his mom's stuff. But we turn it off. I'm like, okay, it's off. We're not watching that. Like, that's just a hard line in our house when it comes to the babies and things that even they watch. So from the time that they're little, I'll instill that into my kids. Like, nope, this is not something we're going to watch. Yes, that's okay. Different things like that. So I would rather do that than just like outlaw all electronics, all TV, because even as an adult, they're going to have to learn that balance. And if you train your kids or teach your kids no TV ever, then like I said, you might as well get rid of your smartphone, because those things are always going to be there. They're going to stay in a hotel and there's going to be a TV. They have to have the character to switch the channel if something comes on that they don't need to be watching, such as nudity, foul language, whatever it is. A happy home is more important than having a checklist of rules. Loving God and loving people are the most important things. Teach those things, and they're most likely going to want to follow God's commandments. And that's what I found with my kids, rather than having a checklist up on the wall. This is what we do. We don't do this. We don't want, we don't watch this, but teach them to love God. Would God want you watching this right now? Would God want you listening to this right now? Would God want you treating your brother or sister in Christ like this right now? Would God want you calling them names? Would you speak this way if God was in the room? And God is in the room. Would you speak this way if Jesus was right in front of you right now? It's a lot better to instill that into them rather than just having this checklist of rules that you can thump your chest about and look at me, everybody. I do this and I don't do that. I have a lot left, so I'm going to try to hurry up through these. Having balanced discipline. We make our home a peaceful place to live when we have balanced discipline. That means appropriate punishment for different ages. Babies, obviously, they just need to be nurtured and cared for. I do not believe in hitting babies. I do not believe in spanking babies. I do not believe in doing that before they get to the point where they can actually communicate with you and understanding what no means. When they reach that point, that is the time to start instilling a little bit of discipline. That could just be a little smack. Middle school ages, this is the toughest age for me. I feel like this is when they push the boundaries the most with me when it comes to sassing, having attitude, not wanting to do what I tell them. I feel like 9 to 13 is like my hardest ages. Now, by the time our kids have gotten to 13, we have not had to use physical discipline at all. And that's just the way we do it in our home. I found I've got 8 kids, so I might have a rebel eventually, but I have found that with my teenagers, they have a real desire to please us as their parents. And oftentimes a severe talking to is about all it takes. And they straighten up because they do want to please us. And young adults, by the time my kids have reached young adults, there has been zero need. We still instruct with our mouth, and, we might just, straighten up. You need to straighten up. This is not acceptable. But we've had obviously no need for any type of discipline at that time. Once they get to 18, 19, we've had zero need for any of that. So, real quick, I'll just And you can refer to, my husband did a clip on kind of how we do things in our home, and you can refer to that on the Liberty Baptist Church channel. Something about tips for discipline. That's how we do things. You can refer to that if you want to learn anything else about how we do things in our home. Number 4, making happy memories for your kids. Make your home a peaceful place by making happy memories. You can do things for cheap, even with a lot of kids. I talked for about 20 minutes on my members only live just a few minutes ago, and I told of some ways that we travel very cheaply. You know, I'm a world traveler. I love traveling the world. There are ways to do it cheap. I am not made of money. I travel very cheaply, probably cheaper than most people do. But I decided if I want to travel, if I want to have this love of mine of traveling, I have to figure out how to do it cheaply. And I have. So there are ways to travel for cheap, even with a lot of kids. Have things that you do around holidays, different traditions that you do. Due dates with individual kids. Right now, I've got Lana and Kelly out there. I'm getting ready to go grocery shopping, and I'm taking them with me. So I try to alternate kids. A lot of times when I take them, I'll get them something special, whether that's a drink from Dunkin' or Starbucks or candy or something like that. And so then they feel like they're special, and they get the one-on-one time. Remember that the years go by quickly. So from the time that you have them from birth, for us, the average age has been about 20, 21 before they leave the nest. Jason will be almost 20. He will be 22 when he officially moves out next May when he gets married. And we kind of believe, based off of biblical principles, that when a girl leaves her home, it's when she's married. When she gets married, she leaves the umbrella of her husband, of her dad, as her authority, and she then goes with her husband. It's just kind of been working out that way for our boys. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with them. Like, Jason owns a house, but he's still living with us while he fixes it up. And he'll probably live with us right until the wedding. Tommy moved out a couple weeks before his wedding. So I don't, okay, weird comment, but anyways, I don't, biblical principles dictate that a girl is under her father's home until she gets married. And that's just kind of how we do things in our house so far. And, so 0 to about 20 in our house is about the time that you have to really instill this in them, that you love them as their parent, right? So moms, tell your girls about their good qualities. Don't be down on yourself, because a lot of the self-image comes from things they hear you say about yourself too. So there are ways to instill self-confidence in your girls, which I've done whole shows on that, to instill self-confidence in your girls and self-worth in your girls, without giving them an inflated sense of ego. Girls need to know their worth, because if they don't, they're just going to go along with any bum that comes along. So they need to know their worth, and they need to know that it needs to be a special guy, who ends up marrying them. So encourage a strong relationship with their dad. It's very important that daughters have a strong relationship with their dad, because he is their protector until they get married. And they're more prone to listen to the advice of one that they're very close to. So definitely encourage that discipline and love, so they'll know they're always going to have your love, even if they mess up. But as parents, we still have that responsibility to discipline them. Be careful with your words. They might remember them for years, and you have the power to build up your daughters and your sons, or tear them down. None of us are perfect, but love covers a multitude of sins. And then loving others. I don't know why you're leaving comments like that on my channel, but okay. Loving others. So talk kindly to others. Talk kindly of others. Let your kids see you do kind things for others. Now, I'm not talking about like doing things, videoing yourself and posting them. I think that's nauseating. I don't like that. I think you're looking for self-glorification, but your kids are watching how you treat others, how you respond to others, what you do for others. They're watching that, and they're learning from that. Don't be someone that is at home, you're just nitpicking and you're being mean and nasty to other people and you're just constantly tearing them down, your kids learn from that. So don't be someone that everyone has to walk around on eggshells. Don't be easily offendable. All those are all really important, and your kids are going to pick up on those. Teach your kids responsibility while also being the one who continues to run the home and raise the kids. Your 14-year-old is not responsible for raising your 2-year-old. Your 17-year-old is not responsible for raising the 5-year-old. You're still the one that has the main responsibility. Now, are the older girls going to think that they're the boss a lot of times? Yes. Because the natural order is that sometimes they're going to be watching their siblings. Okay. But as the mom, it is still your goal, your job to raise those kids. Don't just, what is it called? Like it's something parentify. I can't remember the correct word for it, but your kid is not the parent you are. So let your kids live their life. They're not in charge constantly of the younger ones. I have to be careful with this because I don't, one thing that I do is if they are watching them for like, their dad and I are going out on a date or something, I try to pay them. I pay them wages. If they watch them while I'm teaching, they get paid. I don't want to just take advantage of them. They're not like built-in babysitters. I didn't just have all these kids. My older ones could like watch the younger ones. Now, I will say it does teach them responsibility, and that's it. Thank you, Jen. Parentification. I don't even know if I said that right. Parentification. Yes, that is a real thing. I'm not going to say like it's all bad, but I don't think it's all good either, because I will say that my girls know how to run a home, probably down to Allie, my 14-year-old. They're very responsible. They know how to cook, they know how to clean, they know how to take care of kids. And that, I think that's a benefit of having a large family, because kids just kind of naturally learn that. Parentification, I think it's used in a negative connotation, but it has to do with teenagers, younger teenagers that are older siblings being parentified in a way that kind of a lot of the responsibility of raising the kids falls on them. And that's not always a good thing. You don't have a bunch of kids just to have your older kids raise your younger ones. But like I said, that being said, yes, thank you, Julia. She put it much better than me. It means forcing older children to raise the younger children with no actual parental supervision. Yes. And we actually had, out of a secular home, we had that happen at our old church. She was probably 10 when she started coming, and her little sister was 2. And the mom had mental problems. So this 10-year-old, in essence, raised the 2-year-old. It was kind of crazy to watch. And that can happen in fundamentalist families, and you kind of got to be careful about putting too much responsibility, but it's not all bad, like I said, because kids from bigger families tend to learn these skills, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing as much as it's demonized. Teach them chores, but work alongside with them. Don't sit on the couch eating bonbons expecting them to do everything, right? They learn how to clean from watching you do it. Now, when I had little kids, I was pretty much like cleaning all the time. When I had little kids, I could not have a side gig when I had little kids. I did not have a side gig until about 8 years ago. So I was already a decade and a half into raising kids before I could start teaching piano, basically. So my whole life consisted of cleaning and cooking and raising the kids. But it paid off because it gets easier as they get older. And because of that, my kids watched me. My girls watched me. They cooked alongside of me. They learned how to cook. They learned how to clean a home. And they probably actually are better at cleaning now than I even was when I was raising them. So they're really, really good at cleaning. And that just comes from them watching me and observing me doing it. Them having their little broom sweeping alongside of me. I got them like little broom sets. And you don't have to make it like drudgery and horror and terror. You can make it into a fun game. I would turn on music a lot. I would set a timer for 10 minutes and be like, okay, we're going to see how much we can get picked up in 10 minutes. Ready, go. And we would just all run around as fast as we could. And we would pick up as much as we could in 10 minutes. And interestingly enough, Abigail and Chloe can clean fast. They can clean really, really, really fast. And I think that's just part of some of the fun little games that we used to do when they were growing up. So yeah, that is true. You're right. Whoever you are, Mefuge Reticle. What kind of name even is that? They said parentification can expand far beyond kids raising younger kids. You are right. It can be a child taking care of a parent. And so it doesn't necessarily even mean, and I've read lots of books about true stories about that happening where they had a chronically ill parent, or they had a parent with mental problems, or they had a parent with an addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and they became the parent in this situation. They were, in essence, taking care of their parent. So, oh, that's a good idea. So yeah, it can happen more than just raising younger siblings. It can be also them taking care of a parent. That was a good point. So yeah, clean, but don't be obsessed or turn the home into a war zone from it being messy. And I have to confess my faults here. I did this as a younger mom, especially when we had people over. And I feel like it made my kids ultra critical about having a messy house ever. And that's on me. I bear the blame for that. Yeah, I put too much emphasis on the house being spotless when we would have guests over. And now I've like totally slacked off. I'm like, we live here. I'm sorry. There's going to be shoes right by the door. There's going to be, whatever it is, there's going to be a mess. And my older girls are like, no, it has to be perfect when people are coming over. And I totally bear the blame for that. So take it from someone who's a little older. Just don't turn your house into a war zone, especially when people are coming over, because then they're going to hate the thought of ever having company. Because mom turns into a psycho when company comes over. So yeah, take it from me. Don't be that way. All right. So lastly, be pleasant in the home. Have a smile on your face. Tell your kids you love them. Show your kids you love them. Give them a hug. Give them a kiss. Tell them often. Be approachable. Okay. Don't be like, hey, mom, what? What is wrong? And I know we have a lot on our plate. We're thinking about a lot, but our responses do matter to our children. Be available to talk to, whether that means just putting on your phone, looking in your kids' eyes, and giving them your full attention. Be kind to them. Keep the open line of communication there. They need to know that they can talk to you about problems, whether they're small, whether they're big. You're going to have some kids like Chloe, who's a yapper, and she just literally wants to tell you every minute of her life. And then you're going to have other kids like Abby, who's very private. And I've learned with her, when she actually opens up to me, I listen intently because she doesn't do it very often. And that's just her personality. You have to be very, very close for her, very, very close to her for her to open up to you. So, and it has to be on her terms. Like, she has to decide. With Chloe or Allie, I can just be like, what in the world is wrong? And they'll be like, you know what? Blah, 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 blah. And they'll tell me. But that's how I am. Abigail takes after her grandma, my husband's mom, and I love her, but we have completely opposite personalities. So that can be hard for me not to push when I know there's an issue, but she won't open up to me about it. And you're going to find that with each kid, it's different personality. So you have to learn how to navigate that when it comes to different personalities and, different things like that. So, and then show them how a relationship with Jesus works. You are the first testimony of a Christian to your children. So they're going to base off a lot of how they act, how you act. If you are constantly cursing, they're going to grow up constantly cursing. If you are constantly having issues with people, they are going to grow up and constantly have issues with people. If you are in rebellion to your husband, they are going to grow up in rebellion to you. If you are in rebellion to God, they are going to grow up in rebellion to God. Whatever we do, our children do in excess. So you are their first example of a Christian. And oftentimes, how you act as a Christian is how they're going to act as a Christian as well. So while kids all have their own wills, like I said at the beginning, they are a product of the environment that they are raised in. And the younger years are so important because people will tell you, even when adopting, you can adopt a 2-year-old who's been raised in a horrible, abusive environment, and they will have issues well into their adult life just from things that happened before, too. So, most often when people adopt kids, they like to adopt them as a baby, before they even have any of those early memories, because those early years are so very important and they do shape the personality and the character of the child in whatever home that they are in. So, yeah. Anyways, those are my tips for having a peaceful home. If you can think of any, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Definitely like this video. I keep on forgetting to say this for the algorithms. But like this video, share this video. If you have any questions, my email is gentlyledsisters@gmail.com. Pretty easy. Also, if you are one of my regular listeners and I sent you those CDs a week or two ago, one was to Canada and one was to California. So please let me know if you got those. Shoot me an email, message me through Gently Led Sisters on Facebook. We also have the Gently Led Sisters Facebook group. We have about 450, something like that, members in there. It's a safe place to kind of not be ripped apart. If you have a question, you can post anonymously. No one will know it's you. But if you have a question about the home, question about relationships with your husband, kids, other friends, whatever it is, that is a nice place with women in there from all different backgrounds with different advice. So that's what I find nice about it. It's pretty much drama-free, gossip-free, all that stuff. So, yep. And we also have a Facebook page that you can follow. I've got a blog, all that good stuff. But anyways, you all have a lovely week. I'm pretty sure next week will be on. I am in the process of getting a couple more guests. I'll let you know if that comes to fruition, but that is it for this week. I hope you all have a lovely week and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening.